So, if you're a software tester, you already know your work is serious stuff. But getting other people, especially management, to get it, that can feel like you're a comedian trying out new material on a tough crowd. Being great at testing is one thing, right? But being great at selling the value of that testing, well, that's a completely different skill set. Today, we're going to break down how you turn that technical brilliance into a message that everyone, and I mean everyone, can understand and get behind. All right, to get us started, let's talk about the smoke test. This quote just perfectly captures the, honestly, kind of hilarious and brutal simplicity of where the term came from. It's the most basic check you can imagine. Does the thing immediately burst into flames? If the answer is yes, well, we've got a pretty big problem. If no, okay, we can move on. It really paints a picture, doesn't it? So a smoke test is basically that first crucial check to see if a system is even stable enough to handle more intense testing. The name literally comes from old school plumbing and electronics, where you'd actually look for smoke or leaks as the very first sign of a catastrophic failure. It is the ultimate, no-nonsense, pass-or-fail moment. And what I love about this is how it plugs right into engineering culture. You know, there's this classic inside joke that all electronics run on magic blue smoke. And if you screw up and let that smoke out, poof, the magic's gone and the thing is toast. It's a really funny way to talk about total failure, and it gets us right to the human side of all this technology. Because, you see, the real problem here isn't just about keeping that magic smoke inside the box. The real issue is the huge communication gap between the brilliant people doing the testing and the decision makers who really need to understand why it all matters. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the challenge. So let me tell you a story about a tester we're going to call Alice. Alice was an absolute rock star. She was fast, she was credible, her technical skills were just off the charts. But communicating the value of all that skill, that was a whole other ballgame. So Alice gets a promotion, and she's asked to present the value of her team's work to the C-suite. What does she do? She unleashes what the source material calls a firework of testing. She hit them with everything. Exploratory testing, regression testing, black box, gray box, TDD, BDD, you name it. It was this incredible 60-minute technical masterclass. And the pitch completely bombed, just fell flat. And why? Because she spent all her energy on the how, the nitty-gritty of the craft, and almost no time on the why. She was focused on the practice, not the value. So her audience was just left there thinking, okay, but what does any of this actually do for the business? Now, Alice's story is super common. So why is there such a huge disconnect? Let's start digging into some of the myths and the simple misunderstandings that really get in the way of people seeing the true value of professional testing. Okay, a huge part of the problem is that management often gets professional testing mixed up with what you might call amateur testing. See, professional testing is this strategic, high-skill game. It's like being a detective, methodically solving a complex maze to find those really rare, hidden problems. Amateur testing? That's way more about just gut feeling, where finding a critical bug is honestly more about getting lucky. And this right here gets to the absolute heart of the misunderstanding. I mean, sure, technically anyone can click around an app and see if it breaks, but to test well, to test deeply and systematically, that is a learned skill. It's the difference between buying a lottery ticket and conducting a full-blown strategic investigation. The word tester itself really doesn't help things. It's what we call an overloaded term. What does it even mean? Is it just a job title for HR? Is it a box to check in a project plan? Is it one person doing all the testing for a team, creating a bottleneck? Or is it a specialist who is part of the team, making everyone's work better? If you don't have that clarity, you're pretty much guaranteed to have confusion. So, after that failed pitch, Alice didn't just throw in the towel. No way. She and her team got together and they built a whole strategic framework designed to solve this communication problem once and for all. Let's break down exactly how they did it. What they came up with were these 8 principles for selling excellent testing. And you should really think of this as a complete toolkit, a playbook for turning talented testers into powerful evangelists for their own work. It's all about changing the conversation from testing as a cost to testing as a value add. The first 5 principles here are all about strategy. It's the foundation. First, they reframed selling not as a pitch, but as an exchange of value. Then, they focused on targeting, knowing your audience. They worked on consistency, so the whole team was singing from the same hymn sheet. And of course, practicing the pitch and collaborating to share knowledge. This isn't just about one-off tactics. It's about building a real sustainable communication engine. Let's drill down on that targeting principle because it's so important. Alice learned the hard way that you can't give the same talk to everyone. You've got your primary, tactical audience, your immediate team. Then you have a secondary, more operational level of management. And finally, way up top, you have the tertiary, strategic audience, the execs. Each of these groups cares about totally different things, so your message has to connect directly to their world and their goals. This is such a brilliant analogy they used for the principle of debunking myths. To fight that common idea that testing is just about running a bunch of test cases, they'd say this. A test case is just an artifact, like a recipe. But testing? Testing is the human performance, the skill, the exploration. It's the actual cooking. It just makes a really abstract idea feel totally concrete and easy to get. So we've seen Alice's framework for how to communicate value. But what happens when that kind of communication is ignored? What are the real consequences of failing to sell the seriousness of this work? Well, the stakes are way, way higher than just a buggy app. We're talking about systemic failures with absolutely devastating real-world impacts. To really understand how these massive failures can happen, let's look at Jerry Weinberg's model of software subcultures. You've got organizations that are pattern 0, where people are basically oblivious they're even developing software. Then you get to pattern 2, where, yeah, there are procedures, but they get thrown out the window the second there's a crisis. All the way up to pattern 3, a healthy culture where leaders competently steer based on feedback. Where a company sits on this scale can tell you a lot about whether it's set up for success or for disaster. And that brings us to a truly catastrophic real-world example. The Great Post Office scandal in the UK. This wasn't just a software bug. This was a complete and total breakdown of testing, of communication, of accountability, and of ethics that went on for years and years. You see, the faulty Horizon IT system made it look like money was vanishing from local post office branches. Because of that, hundreds of honest sub-postmasters were wrongly accused of theft and fraud. These people lost their life savings, their homes, their reputations. Some were even sent to prison. The human cost was just unimaginable. So what went so horribly wrong? Well, the key failures tied directly back to every single principle Alice's team developed. The testing findings were ignored or completely suppressed. The value wasn't communicated, there was no collaboration, no consistency. Instead of a culture of quality, there was a culture of blame. It was a total systemic failure, where the value of testing, and more importantly, the people doing it, was tragically ignored. Which brings us to our final thought here. From our banking systems to healthcare to our public services, our entire lives run on incredibly complex software. And that software is built and tested by people. So after seeing what happens when things go wrong, the question we all have to ask ourselves is this. Are we creating the kinds of cultures that value their work enough to prevent the next disaster from happening?